Hello and welcome to the Revere Veterans Corner Community Show. Today we have a special guest. He's head of the Revere Republican City Committee. His name is Glenn LaCedra. Welcome, Glenn.
Thanks for having me, Morris.
Glenn has lived 41 years in the city of Revere and is a graduate of Northeastern University. Now, Glenn, I got some questions that I'm going to ask you. How long has the Revere Republican City Committee been in existence?
Well, pretty much it had been in existence before, but what happened is it was kind of a lull. We lost a lot of members, so pretty much a year. The newest committee that's headed by my brother, Chairman Greg LaCedra, he pretty much started it with Joyce Kelly and Paul Ronyakaitis, who are party people, and they started it last year, about, I'd say, March of last year.
And what else have you done with the Revere Republican City Committee?
Well, basically what we've done is we've supported our candidates, and when I mean support, I mean we've held signs for them. We've done phone banking, over 25,000 calls for certain candidates. We've raised money, we've given them time and other things.
I'd like to ask you this question, if I may, Glenn. What is the main difference between the Republican Party and the Democratic Party in the city of Revere?
Well, what's happening is today's Democratic Party is not your father's Democratic Party. Before, it used to be actually for the working class. The Democrats did stand for something at one time. Now it seems like what's happening, they've shifted. And what the Democratic Party has come into is basically it's special interest. And they have control of the special interest groups. And they've pretty much pigeonholed themselves into 3 special interest groups. Whereas the Republicans are more, I would say, less government, less in taxes, and more opportunity. So the way I looked at it is I've seen it change the Democratic Party, where in fact I didn't leave the Democratic Party. Pretty much it left me. So I had no alternative but the Republican Party.
So you were a Democrat at one time?
Well, democratic values such as my father and my grandfather. My grandfather was a cab driver for many years, check taxi. He was a Teamster, and he was very proud of it. And later in life, when about 1992, he started saying, boy, they're changing, and they're changing dramatically different. I mean, I don't like what they've become. And it's mostly special interest. I don't want to get really into the special interest because it might offend some people. But basically, if you see the Democratic Party today, it's pretty much controlled by an elite group. They seem like they're elitist to me.
Okay, that's a good answer. And my next question is, what are the goals of the Revere Republican City Committee?
The goals of the Revere Republican City Committee is very simple and easy. We want to get everyone out there, whether they be Democrats, Republicans, or Independents, and realize that today's Republican Party actually takes on their values. They're pretty much the common man approach, you know, for an uncommon party. A lot of times they thought, well, the Republicans were for the rich, for the certain
That's what you hear, but that's not the truth.
But that's not true. That's a fallacy. Basically, the Revere Republican City Committee is trying to educate people to realize that, hey, we want a lesser government. We want less taxes. We want more opportunity. I mean, today, now you have a Democratic Party that's so obsessed with gun control and the Second Amendment and destroying the Second Amendment that pretty much anything that attacks the Constitution is criminal to me. The 3rd President of the United States, Thomas Jefferson, once said, people that fear the government, there's tyranny. But when the government fears the people, we have liberty. Today, it's coming close to tyranny, when a government can tell you exactly what to do, or they can seize your guns for no apparent reason, when in fact the Second Amendment said the right to bear arms shall not be infringed. To me, the first 10 amendments of the Constitution, individual rights are very important. I think the Republican Party today stands for those rights.
Right. The only thing I could see about the Democratic Party before I go on further is, you know, having a check of people that want to buy guns. Let's say you and I want to go out and buy a gun. I see nothing wrong with them checking my background to see that I don't have a criminal record or I'm not mentally ill. There's nothing wrong with that. I believe the Republicans believe the same thing as the Democrats
do.
But
I have to disagree because basically there's a candidate that's here today and he tells you there's 3,600 gun laws on the books right now. Federal, state, and local gun laws. 3,600. We have the most stringent gun laws in Massachusetts and in Connecticut, yet Sandy Hook occurred. Gun control is not a gun control issue. Basically, the ATF, or the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, is responsible for all background checks. When you buy a pistol or a rifle, you have to fill out a form. It's an
Right.
ATF form, and it goes to them. They fax it to them, and then they tell you a preliminary approval. And in 7 days, they do the background check. What they're telling you now, that we need background checks, they already have it. They have the federal firearms registration. They have people in federal prison that are serving time for not registering their firearms.
Right, and I got to ask you this question then. I can go to a gun show and buy a gun or buy a pistol and not have it registered, or I mean, the number may be registered, but they don't have my name. I get the pistol and I sell it to Joe Schmo down the street there, who's a little loony, and then he goes off and kills, like you say.
But Morris, there's a misconception. I've been to gun shows in Tennessee, Mississippi, other places.
Right.
And I'll tell you, they want to see your license.
Yep.
They want to make sure it's you. You can't buy a gun in Mississippi unless you're a Mississippi resident. You can't just come there from Massachusetts and say, I'd like to buy a gun.
But is that all the 50 states?
Pretty much, they're pretty stringent. They tell you, well, you can go in a gun and buy. I mean, you can buy in a gun show real easy. That's not the case. If someone goes in there and they basically said, yeah, I'd like to buy a gun, and they said, well, you have a license? Well, no, I don't have a license on me, but I really like to buy that gun. They have a federal firearms license, a person that's selling it at the gun show. They don't want to risk that. I mean, it's all a misconception. Basically, what they're telling you is, we need a registration. If you have a federal registration, it now violates the Second Amendment. There was two very important cases from the Supreme Court that said that that's wrong. I mean, this is not a case of gun control. What it is the over-medication of America, because most of those people that did those crazy things, and I'm not condoning them, such as Sandy Hook and Aurora, Colorado,
I know.
most of them are mentally ill. They couldn't get permits. They couldn't get licenses to carry guns because they were mentally ill to begin with. They were on pharmaceuticals. They were on the drugs that were highly causing hallucinations. They were basically obsessed with video games, violent video games. And another thing was these people were like close to being institutionalized. Now you see them on TV, when they show them, they look like they're zombies.
Okay. My next question is to you, Glenn. What message would you like to convey to our friends and viewers out there in Revere about the Revere Republican City Committee, and that's to the people of Revere?
Well, instead of listening to talk radio, sitting there and getting steaming and getting mad, and when they talk about this newest bombing in the Boston Marathon.
Yeah, that happened.
Listen.
Behind us.
Everybody can preach to the choir. They can call up Howie Carr and they can say, I'm mad with this and this and that. Let's get together. Let's put some ideas together and make some changes together. And the Revere Republican City Committee, if you join us and you come, we can sit there and we discuss all these different issues and what we can do.
Right, and they could see the Revere Republican City Committee meetings by watching the scrolls put out by Revere TV.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, my fourth questions. I went to one of your meetings, so I can ask that. How many members usually show up for these meetings, and what issues are discussed?
Well, what happens is we have right now about 45 committee people that are actually registered. They come. We have anywhere between 16 individuals to 45 individuals, depending upon what time of the year it is. Now, in the winter, it was very cold. We understand that a lot of people weren't showing up. But you have to also understand, too, after 2012, a lot of people are disillusioned with what happened. So they figure, oh, we don't stand a chance. But, I mean, you fall down, you get back up, you try again. But we can actually, where we have the meetings, we can actually have 100, 200 people. There is over 1,600 registered Republicans in the city of Revere.
Would I be correct, Lynn, in saying that Massachusetts was the first state to have a Republican senator who was African American? I believe that was Edward Brooke. Would I be?
Yes, exactly. Not only that, about the Republican Party, they've missed the whole concept of the Republican Party. You have to understand the Democratic Party was the party of slavery before the Civil War.
Right.
They pushed the abolitionists of the Republican Party under Abraham Lincoln, who served from 1861 to 1865, was an abolitionist to abolish slavery. You know, they've got the whole, they've changed it all around where now the Republican Party is looked upon as like they're trying to enslave you, they're trying to take over, they're trying to do this, they're trying to do that. It's all misconception. If people read or they come to our meetings, they'll understand that the Republican Party actually mirrors their values, the values of the working common man.
We have some, well, I remember as a kid, we had, when Franklin Roosevelt was president, that's when I grew up, We had some good Republicans like Thomas Dewey, at that time governor of New York, Wendell Willkie. These were great Republican people. They just didn't win because New York is predominantly a Democratic state too. As a matter of fact, just like Massachusetts. So I'd like to ask you the next questions. When a new member comes into your meeting, what does he expect when he first gets there? Let's say it's me. I'm coming into your meeting.
Well, we would definitely welcome you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. And then basically sit down and say, hey, listen, is it all right if when our time comes we introduce you as a new member? Or basically you could tell a little about yourself. And we did that the last meeting. And you get up, you tell a little about yourself, and everybody introduces themselves. So you get to know and get a feeling of like, hey, basically, you know, you're not the only one. And then you listen. You pretty much, what we do is we go over, there's procedures such as the chairman will get up there. We'll do a Pledge of Allegiance, which is very important because we're very pro-American. And then we'll get up there and we'll talk about, we'll have a treasurer's report, the secretary's report, what happened at the previous meeting. And then we might have a guest speaker. If we have a guest speaker, you can ask him questions. And we've had a few. We've had George Rotundro on last month.
Right.
And he got up there and he answered all kinds of questions. Then what we do is we have like an open discussion where you're invited to get up there and, hey, you know, put it out there.
Right.
Anyone. I mean, we welcome everyone, whether they be Democrat, Republican, or Independent. Because I think if they come to the meeting a few times, they'll want to become a Republican.
I got to ask you this, if you can remember. The youngest Republican that you had coming in and the oldest Republican you had coming in.
Oh, that's easy, that's easy, Morris. You might be the oldest Republican we have coming.
Flattery, I guess you know.
Yes. But the youngest, I think the youngest is 18. I'm not sure, 18 or 19.
Oh, you have. There's no age limit, though. I mean, you know, you could be like a young kid if you wanted to come in like, let's say, a high school kid.
Why not? Listen, we're open to everyone. As a matter of fact, the Democratic Party, what they do is they try to ingratiate themselves to the young and try to put them one way, which is left, progressive leaning. Come one, come all. Once you hear what we have to say, you'll feel good about yourself. You say, you know something? These people are not whacked out. They're not like right-wing crazies. They actually believe in what I believe in, and they want to push. In other words, we want a stronger America. We want a smaller, more productive government. And not only that, we want a hand up. The Democratic Party is basically for a hand out. We want to give you a hand up so you can be successful. And that's how the Republican Party is.
Right, that's pretty good. Okay, another question. This was given to me by a gentleman, which I would like to ask you. Does a person who comes to the meeting have to be a registered Revere Republican in order to attend and participate?
No, not at all. We have some that are independents. They're unenrolled. And there was 3 members, as a matter of fact, that came. And they changed. After they went to about 6 or 7 meetings, they decided it's for them. They want to be a Republican, so they changed and became a Republican. But there are some people, because of their given situations, such as their job, employment, that they don't want to be known as a Republican. Because, I mean, it's a public list if you're a registered Republican. And some people take a lot of flack for being a registered Republican.
Where do you find out whether you're a registered Republican or not?
You can go down to City Hall and you get what they call a street listing, the Revere street listing.
And that would list it?
It'll list your address, it'll list your name, and it'll list you what party you're a member of. It takes a lot for somebody to say, hey, listen, it's a minority party, but I want to be a member of it. You know, it takes a lot. But basically, we believe that if we get our message out there and people do attend, and they see what type of people are there, they're blue-collar workers, regular people, people that pay taxes, not people that are on the dole, or people that basically tell you, well, what's the government going to do for me? In other words, a long time ago, didn't JFK say, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country?
Right, but JFK was a Democrat, too, but he thought like a Republican.
But if he was alive today, he wouldn't recognize today's Democratic Party.
True.
He would not recognize it at all. And I'll tell you the truth, he might be an independent or he might be a Republican. Because
unenrolled.
Yeah, unenrolled, definitely unenrolled. Yes.
Right. Okay, my next question to you is, what does your committee hope to achieve in the next year? But before we go into the next year, if I may ask you, Glenn, what have we achieved so far this year? I mean, what the Republican Party has achieved this year.
What we're trying to do is we're trying to gain membership. We're trying to get our message out that, listen, we're all inclusive. That whoever you are, if you have the same ideas, and they're common sense ideas, come, enjoy, partake, because I'll tell you the truth, we want to hear what you have to say. We want to hear everyone, whether you be liberal, moderate, conservative, ultra-conservative, or whatever. We want to hear it.
It's,
It's an all-inclusive party. It's not like, oh, gee, it's just for stuffy old white men. It's not.
it's for every American.
It's for everyone, every American.
Very good.
And that's what we're trying to achieve this year. As for next year, what we're trying to do is get viable candidates to run. See, the worst thing in the world in this democracy that we have, or what we so-call democracy, is we don't have term limits. Term limits is basically every election cycle. So what we have is we have these people that are running that are unopposed.
I got to say something. You know, there's pros and cons to term limits, and let me, my personal opinion. Without term limits, if I want to run, except for the president, which has, I believe, a two-term limit.
Yes, 2 terms.
2 terms. If I want to run, I have to continue to do good things. If I have a term limit and say after my second term I can't run anymore, I could be the nut passing laws that would make no sense at all because I got nothing to lose. So it's good to, in some cases, not to have term limits, and in some cases to have them. As President of the United States, I could see that. Otherwise, you would have a dictatorship like they have overseas. But there's been some councilors, representatives, I'm talking to Washington, who've been there 30 years. Mayor Menino himself, it's been, I think...
Been there since 1993.
20 years, correct. And how much, so that's 3.5 terms?
That's quite a few, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
see? But he accomplished a lot by being mayor of Boston for that time. But if he had a term limit, let's say he can only have 2 terms, he could have done a kaput job on our last term.
Well, let me give you an
Be my
example.
guest. Be my guest.
Okay, let's not have term limits. Let's say elections are term limits. But let's put it this way. This particular Senate race.
Right.
There's 2 congressmen that are running. Okay?
Yeah. Don't mention their names.
No, they're serving. One's been there for 36 years. Another one's been there maybe about, I think, 10.
Right.
Now, is it fair that they could run for Senate but yet not give up their seat? In fact, if we had a law that says, if you want to run for U.S. Senate, we'll give up that congressional seat. Because basically, you're not doing that job. You're basically running for Senate. That's your full-time job right now. So give it up. If we had a law like that, there'd be less people that would be there for 36 or 40 years. Because what would happen is they wouldn't go for anything else. Now we'd have to put the microscope on them, and they wouldn't.
What you just mentioned, there's a race going on in Boston now for the mayor. There's a gentleman whose name I won't mention and whose ward I won't mention. He happens to be a city councilor, but he's also running for mayor, and he's also filed papers for city council. And he said if he wins both of them, let's say he won the city council and the mayor, he would have to give up one of them. So he can run for 2 offices. If he wanted to, he could run for 3 if he wanted.
See, that's wrong. That's dead wrong. There's a mayor up in Lawrence, and I'm not going to say his name.
Right.
And I'm friends with him. He's a very nice man. But he had 2 positions. He was a state rep, and he was the mayor of Lawrence.
At the same time?
At the same time, and that was unfair.
Right.
Because it's unfair to the people in his constituents and the ones that elected him. Because you can't get a full-time state rep or you can't get a full-time mayor if you have 2 jobs. That's what's happening today. That's a pet peeve of mine. Someone's running for United States Senator, will then step down and say, I'm going to go for U.S. Senator, put everything, all my marbles, all my eggs in the same basket. Instead, what they do is they run and they don't want to give up their seat. They do it in a special election year. That was done when, a few years back when we had a special election, we had an attorney general that did the same thing. She should have stepped down. When they run, they're taken away from the people that elected them for that first office. Basically, if they're a congressman, now they're running for U.S. Senate, they're not doing the job of their congressman, so step down. That's what we should have. We should have laws that do that.
Okay. This is going to put you on the spot, Glenn. Okay. In your opinion, what are the main differences between today's Democratic Party and the platform of the Republican Party? We discussed a little of that before, but elaborate a little bit more.
Well, what's happened to the Democratic Party is basically, it's a puppet for the special interest groups. One being that, in fact, we've seen it with President Obama's Obamacare. In fact, we had a union leader by the name of Trumka, who's the head of the AFL-CIO, and he pretty much controlled and architected what went on. And we've seen sweet deals between certain people that they don't come under Obamacare. And Congress is doing the same thing now. They're trying to pass a law now where they're going to be exempt from Obamacare, and so is the president. And I don't understand this. If you're going to pass laws, don't we all come under the same law? If you pass one law, that there's a red light and you have to stop at a red light, we all have to
Exactly.
come under that law. Well, what happens is the Democratic Party today it's ingratiated themselves to the special interest groups. You have groups that are basically fringe groups that now are getting a lot more, how would you say, a lot more speed on what they want to do. Whereas the Republican Party is like, hey, wait a minute, let's not do it that fast. One being is abortion. Planned Parenthood gets a lot of money. Now, they talk about, well, choice and pro-choice and pro-life. Now, if I'm pro-life, which I am, because of my beliefs, my Catholic beliefs, if I'm pro-life, I don't want my tax money going for state and federally funded abortions. I don't. But then again, the government tells me, oh, no, you don't have that right to tell us what to do. Planned Parenthood then tells you, we're getting money from the government, but for mammograms, not for abortions. That's untrue. There's been 26 million abortions committed in the last 20 years.
Wow.
Through them. Now, if my money, my tax money is going towards that, that's wrong. It's against my religious values. Now, what I want is, granted, it's the law of the land, Roe v. Wade. Every woman has a right of freedom of choice, But pay for it yourself. In other words, don't let state or federally funds come in. Pay for it yourself. If you want an abortion, then do it. Do you understand? It would be a lot easier if the day after pill was over the counter, because if it was over the counter, you get rid of all that abortion issue. And that's what's happening. The special interest groups have taken over the Democratic Party, whereas, in fact, the Republican Party, you say, well, there's some, but not many. What, the NRA, the National Rifle Association, all they're doing is sticking up for the Second Amendment. I don't see any problem with that.
By the way, I'd like to ask you a question. You say you went to Northeastern University.
Yes, sir, I did. Very proud. Husky.
Right. Up on Huntington Avenue, is that the one?
Huntington Avenue, yes.
Okay. How was it like at the time you went there, which was in the year, I believe? Okay, Glenn, tell me what year?
The 80s. I graduated in 1986.
Okay.
It was a different time.
And you're about 51, you say?
51 years old.
God bless you.
Wow.
You're a good 51 compared to me.
You're 51 too?
No.
That's fantastic.
Thank you, buddy. No, but talk about what I like. For example, what was like? Every university has its own political things group in there. How was it like when you were there? That's what I'd like to know.
Northeastern University in the 80s was basically a school, a working man's school. You had a lot of people that went there. That it was at a tuition rate that a lot of people could go. A lot of people got accepted, but very few graduated. But the whole thing was it was affordable. It wasn't like Boston College. It wasn't like Boston University. It was affordable in the 80s.
Is it still affordable today?
Not too much when it's $32,000. I think it's $27,000 to $32,000 a year to go.
A year?
Yeah, which is a lot. So back in the 80s, it was a different approach. You're thinking you had Reagan as president. He rejuvenated America. He pretty much gave us an energy that we hadn't had in a long time.
By the way, he was a former Democrat at one time, too.
He was, too. Some of his speeches were, he said if the Democratic Party did not leave him, he would have ran as a Democrat for president, but they left him. And he's seen it. He's seen it out in California. Things were changing. And what happens out in the left coast usually comes over to here. But, of course, now we're the most liberal state in the nation, not California. They run like second or third. Okay,
we have a few minutes left. We have about 4 or 5 minutes left. Why don't you take about 2 or 3 minutes and wrap up what you would like to say, if I may?
Yeah, I want to tell your viewers, and I want to thank you for inviting me here.
It was my pleasure.
Yes. And first and foremost, I want to say, I mean, we had a tragedy, which was the Boston Marathon, and I want to say, a special prayer and a special thoughts for those people and those victims, and also the heroes, the police.
One of them is right from our own city.
That's right.
Chief Caffarelli.
Caffarelli. He helped get one of these suspects.
He was the one that looked in to see where Joka.
Yes.
I believe that's his name, Joka.
I want to thank them because they put their life on the line for us and for our freedom. And what I want to convey to people out there is this. The Republican Party today, it's a misconception. A lot of Democrats say, well, it's for the rich, it's for the old, it's for this, it's a white upper class. That's not true.
We have African Americans.
Yes. Some of your richest members of Congress are Democrat. John Kerry was the richest member in the U.S. Senate. Now he's your Secretary of State. I mean, the misconceptions, we allow them to happen. There's a lot of misinformation and voters that they don't hear a lot of things.
But I think he's doing a good job as Secretary, or trying to do a good job as Secretary of State. He's dealing with people out there that are not, that don't love us, let's put it that way.
Give him a year or two and see how he does.
Okay.
But now, what's happening is the Republican Party, and I want people to, if you come to a meeting, you'll basically see that we're common sense, regular people, just like you and I.
Thank you.
And we're not elitist, and we're not going to sit there and go, oh, by the way, you're just not a real Republican and you don't drink brandy. There's none of that stuff. I mean, all those misconceptions, you'll throw them out. Just come, enjoy the meeting, voice your thoughts, and I'll tell you the truth. You will feel, let's put it this way, it'll be stimulating, and you know what's something? You'll feel, well, now I have alternatives what to do. Instead of calling talk radio and screaming and yelling, and at the end, you know, threatening the president or whatever it may be. Now you can come and we can tell you, hey, listen, we get some viable candidates on the ballot. That's fantastic. Because the worst thing in the world is to have a candidate that doesn't have an opposition. Because you know what he does? He gets his thumb up to you and says, I don't care what you say.
You know, Glenn, I would like to say one thing to the people of Revere and to the people of Massachusetts. You know, a lot of them complain, but when it comes time to vote, they don't, and then they say that.
It's very important.
It's very important that everyone, whether they be Democrat, Republican, unenrolled, whatever, go out and vote at every election.
It's very important. It's very important.
Right, Glenn. And before we wrap up, I want to say it was a pleasure to have you come up here and talk about the Revere Republican.
Thank you for inviting me anytime. And
right. And I hope to see you again later on, and maybe in a few months, to let us know how things came along. I would also like to say God bless you, like I do to every guest that I have here.
Thank you.
And I want to say God bless our troops, God bless America, God bless the city of Revere, but especially God bless the United States of America and all the people that live in it.
Yes, sir. Oh, yeah.
And thank you for listening. Until the next time. And Glenn, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.